Welcome back to the Exempt List. We are a month out from the playoffs, but 4 weeks left in the regular season. A lot to talk about, a lot to discuss. We're going to be joined today by Sports Illustrated's Conor Orr. We're going to get right into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Exempt List. Like I said in the intro, we have a month left in the season. There's a lot going good, a lot going bad. This weekend was fun. If you enjoy seeing players rage on the field, from the Chiefs to the Saints and everything in between. And to break it down, got Conor Orr from Sports Illustrated. He's a senior writer over there covering the NFL. Does a great job. Conor, how are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well, Charles. How are you?
I'm good. I've hit the point in the season where I'm pretty tired like every single day. But outside of that, it's a good time. You know, I mean, I know we talk about the Falcons a lot on the show. We're going to get to it later, but I can't believe they're playing games with stakes at this point in the season. And I can't believe that this is what the games with stakes look like, where you're going back and forth with Baker Mayfield and you're hoping that the Saints lose a game to the Panthers, which they probably will never do with this current version of the Panthers. So I'm having a good time, but I am a little bit tired of some of the nonsense that I've seen from my favorite teams and some of the other stuff around the league. What about you?
Yeah, last night was sort of like after the Giants game, I couldn't even summon the Tommy DeVito joy. And that's when I know that I've lost the plot for the season. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like, what a cool story. And his dad's kissing his agent, and his agent has wedged himself into every shot on television to make sure that he
looks crazy, by the way.
Yeah.
He needs to take off like a layer of makeup. Just one layer, bro.
He dresses like he's like going to shake someone down. But yeah, I was like, everyone's like, what a cool story. And I'm just like, my joy immediately diminished when I look over at the clock and I'm like, God, the Titans are still playing. And then I'm not going to bed before midnight. And then it was just like, oh man. But I'll turn it around. I hit my second win later. The games were good.
Okay, so the Tommy DeVito thing is pretty funny to me. So for those who don't know, I played college football Division III at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania. And I'm not even joking when I say this. I would say 90 to 92% of the team was from New Jersey, like Italian guys from New Jersey. So like during these Giants games, my phone's kind of like blowing up a little bit. Like, bro, this is the coolest thing you've ever seen. Tommy D taking the Giants on a 3-game winning streak. I'm like, oh, you guys are actually tickled by this, you know? Like, the North Jersey meathead, like that crowd, like they're really loving it. And I gotta say, like, he's actually improved. And I always love these little moments. And we'll get into the funny things from the weekend first. But I always love these little moments where like a guy comes out of nowhere and now he's going to get to play for like half a decade off of this run.
Well, you live in the New York area. You covered teams in the New York area. And the best part of it, right, is, I'm taking my son to school this morning, and on the radio, it's like, okay, well, we're talking about Tommy DeVito now competing with Daniel Jones in camp next year. Or like, maybe we can't draft somebody in the first round because we have Tommy DeVito. And it's like, we did this with Mike White. We did this with Joe Flacco. We did this with, oh my God, let's go all the way back to Greg McElroy in 2010. Like every New York quarterback has like 3 good games. Then we project out an entire post-realism fantasy, and then we watch it come crashing back when a defensive coordinator gets 4 weeks worth of tape on the guy and he's actually not that good. No offense to Tommy DeVito, who I love, and it just works. Like there are some people who, I live in Italian New Jersey. I married Italian New Jersey. I understand it. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And he has just marinated himself in the stereotypes to the point where he is the everyman. And I love that. But I think it has its limitations for sure.
Yeah, it definitely has its limitations. We'll get to the New York quarterback market because it was definitely an interesting weekend for that. But let's backtrack and look at some funny things from the weekend. And one of the funniest things from the weekend, to me at least, is the Bears just putting the absolute hurt on the Detroit Lions. Like, I don't really know if it's out of nowhere, because, you know, if you track what has happened to the Bears this season, starting from, you know, the infamous coach, defensive coordinator just leaving before week 2 started, through now, like, it's kind of a totally different team than the start of the season. The defense is playing a whole lot better. Justin Fields is playing well. You know, over the past month, I guess they're on a different path than the Lions, where the Bears are kind of trending up and the Lions are trending down a little bit. And it kind of culminated this weekend in a game where they beat the Lions by 2 scores. Aiden Hutchinson had a couple of like really costly mistakes that directly led to 2 touchdowns. One where he jumped off sides on 4th and 13, where they were trying to get you to jump off sides. And he's playing 3 technique too, so he's standing right over the ball. And he jumps off sides. Dude, you know they're not going to run a play, because I think they had a lead at that point. You give a free play, touching DJ Moore. And then there was another play where he freelanced a stunt and ended up rushing the B gap with his teammate, while Justin Fields just kind of booted out on the other side and then scrambled in for a touchdown. Is there a possibility that we're walking into a world where Justin Fields can do enough where he remains as the Bears starter for 2024?
Yeah. And I think for them, like Chicago, you don't care almost, right? Because you have the number 1 pick. And if Justin Fields is great through the end of this season, it just opens up infinite options for you. It makes your regime look better in hindsight. Like, this is all house money for them at this point. Like, if you're Ryan Poles, you are maybe at some point worried about losing your job, or, you know, having to get rid of your head coach. You know, certainly the latter of those discussions are probably still happening. But now you look like a person where you can spin Fields. Another team would take him right now. I mean, the complete lack of talent at that position. I mean, Fields is what, the 11th best quarterback, maybe 10th best quarterback in the NFL if he's playing the way he's playing right now.
He turns 20. He turns 25 in March too. So like, there's still a long leash left on this. Yeah,
and I don't know, like, you know, I don't think you would even have to. I mean, the contract would be interesting, you know, because he's getting to that point, and I don't know what you would necessarily do with it. But for the Bears, like, I think their whole goal for this was to legitimize the process. And if they can get to the point where Eberflus is calling games, he's, you know, making it tough on divisional opponents, and Luke Getsy's able to do his thing, and that like fake wildcat reverse thing, DJ Moore, like, he's a creative guy. He comes up with cool stuff. I think they're in a great spot. And you know, to the point where, gosh, I mean, I was projecting who they were going to hire as a head coach, but now it's like they might finish the season with 7 wins, get the number 1 pick, let Fields compete it out in training camp. You know, like, there's so many different scenarios. Or you trade the number 1 pick again, you know, which would be amazing.
Well, think about this. I was looking at like the kind of trying to project I guess what the quarterback landscape could look like in the NFL. We're kind of running out of options here a little bit. It's not what we saw a few years ago, like where you had the mix of, you know, veteran talent that was still playing well, you know, where there was like a stretch where like Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, like they were still playing really good football as, you know, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson entered the league. And you kind of had like a nice little run there where it felt like a lot of teams felt set at quarterback for a little bit. And then you have those veteran guys retire. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers next year with the Jets, or this year. We'll see. Still not buying that really at all. There's not really a whole lot of options. Even when you look at college football right now, usually you're able to peg out, because we've been talking about Caleb Williams and Drake May being the number 1 pick, or number 1 and number 2 pick for a couple of years now. We're not really talking about that like anyone else in college football. So when you start looking at even the 2025 and 2026 is a little bit further out, but 2025, there's not really a bona fide number 1 overall pick quarterback prospect right now. Plus, you look at what's happening with players who are in the NFL right now, you might be able to like drum up a real bidding war for Justin Fields if you're going to put him out on the market, or if you do the other thing, and let's say he continues the streak and he plays well enough where you just say, hey, we can build around him. If you can trade the number one pick in a year where so many teams need to get their hand on a quarterback, you could get a real haul for them. So I think it's just amazing kind of what's happened here where one, you go from week 1 through week like 3, Eberflus is definitely getting fired. He's done. To now, I would be pretty surprised if they fired him at the end of the season. And you're building so much value with the quarterback kind of wasteland where Justin Fields becomes a more valuable entity and the number one pick becomes a super valuable entity if you decide to trade that. I'm pretty interested to see what the Bears do because I don't think the Panthers are going to win another game this season to kind of knock them out that top spot.
So I think that the lack of quarterback play is creating a scenario where a lot of teams are just accepting, like we have such a glut of whatever you want to call it, round 3 to round 7 talent that's coming out every year into the pipeline. You know, people liked Brock Purdy people like Brock Purdy now. They pretend to like Brock Purdy now because he came through college with such a wealth of experience. And at that point, that was viewed as a bad thing because it's like, okay, we've seen everything that we could possibly see out of this guy, and there's no way he's going to get better. When the truth is, like Brock Purdy was at Iowa State. He was lifting like with the fullbacks. He was doing like legitimately like heavy deadlifts and like cleans, and they said like his quads were the size of like Olympic cyclists, right? He didn't have a quarterback specific program there. So you get these guys now that have taken 500, 600 snaps in college. You get them with somebody who can actually show them how to change their arm slot a little bit, get a little bit more. And all of a sudden you have this like class of people who you can just reproduce as your definition of game managers, and then you take all your draft capital and you throw it around. I mean, I think that's how a lot of the league is going to end up surviving. But what helps the Bears now is you have a potential guy in Justin Fields who I think could grow into your top tier quarterback with that alien skill set. And you're also holding a lottery ticket for a guy who very well may be that too. And that's a super enviable position where, you know, if you want to graduate to that level where you have a Josh Mahomes or a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, any of those guys, you're going to need to pay a premium. So it's like you said, 4 weeks ago, I'm like, man, it probably sucks to be the Bears. And now I'm like, if I were like Ben Johnson and you have your pick, I would at least call them before I make a decision and be like, hey, would you guys want to do this? Because this is probably where I'd want to go.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I think if this trajectory continues for Fields, like since he got back from his injury, he's been playing some damn good football. Even before that, like he had some games, some real flashes. Could you get a first round pick for him? Like maybe not 2024, but a 2025 first round pick. I don't know. I don't think that's off the table considering his age. And like Fields is one of those players where if you can just put it together, like, because we know you can do this, you know, like at a pretty high level. It's just the inconsistencies from like play to play, down and down. But he's starting to like slowly get rid of that. And also like the field stuff to me this year, I think it's a kind of reminder that some of these guys just take a little bit longer to figure it out than others, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm really excited to see where his career develops, whether it's in Chicago or somewhere else, like maybe, I don't know, Atlanta. That'd be kind of cool.
I think all these guys, though, I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, you know, the Geno Smith thing, like everyone's saying, well, the Jets never gave him time. You also can't give a quarterback 12 years to develop or 10 years to develop. It's just, it doesn't work that way. But, you know, you can be more open-minded about players. And, you know, Fields, I think, is the perfect example where you've basically been asking him to be a square peg in a round hole since he got into the NFL. He's finally figuring it out kind of on his own, on the fly, and then you adapted along with him. And now he's given you something that you can call on a steady basis that makes some sense. He's making teams, you know, I remember the Lions game last year, the last Lions game last year, and the first Lions game this year, where both times, you know, last year, they're daring him to throw. It's a situation where he has to set them up for a game-winning field goal. They just put everybody up on the line. They're in cover zero, and they're like, yeah, good luck, dude. And he throws it away. This year, the first game where they barely lost, Fields got them in position. He made the throw. And now he's making those developments. He's taking those steps. And so, yeah, first round pick. I mean, just looking at the NFL standings right now, if you're the Raiders, would you do it? Probably. If you're the...
Dude, if the Falcons win the division or the Bucks win the division, I would ship off the 19th pick for Justin Fields, probably. I think it might be a little bit of a tough decision, but there's going to be a bidding war for his services.
If you're the Commanders, would you do it? I mean, the Commanders might end up sinking into a top 2. I think they still have a chance because it's weird. It gets weird after the Panthers. But yeah, there's a ton of teams. If you're the Vikings, would you, like Vikings or the Jets even, where you have a guy or you're going to bring back Kirk Cousins because there's no talent at the position, but would you let him develop there a little bit more? I mean, I think he'd want to start, but there's so many options. And half the league needs a guy as good as Justin Fields right now. So I don't know. That's fun, but it also makes me nervous. Like if I'm Ryan Poles, like you can't screw that up. You can't.
Yeah.
You know,
because if you trade away Justin Fields and you draft Caleb Williams and Drake May, and Justin Fields ends up like just taking the supernova launch in a different team, that's a bad look. But I think people would forgive you because the process is kind of what everyone would do. You know, they're probably going to trade Fields, take May or Williams number 1, and I think even that's a pretty good scenario for them. I part of me does wish that they had kept losing, so that they could do like quarterback plus Marvin.
Fantasy game?
Yes. Quarterback plus Marvin, but they've definitely like they're on track to not even be in range within Marvin Harrison Jr. right now. They have the 5th pick right now. I think it's going to be a little bit higher when it's all said and done, which is just amazing, really, for what they've been able to accomplish this year. I because the vibes were so bad when the season started. Because you remember even Justin Fields got into the little the little spat. I wouldn't even call it spat with the media, but where he said, he's just going to go out there and just start ripping it because he was playing pretty poorly earlier in the season. And then that kind of got misconstrued. And now here they are with the 5th pick in the draft and also 1 game out of the NFC playoff race.
Absolutely insane. You know what like Fields too. I mean, you've covered the Jets. You've seen how that market can destroy quarterbacks. I would rank Chicago way up there with Philadelphia as well. And I think that the one advantage to Justin now is he's weathered, like it's not going to get worse. It's going to be hard to step in it harder than he did. And I'm not blaming it on him. Like you said, the comments are sort of misconstrued, but he has weathered the storm to the point where I don't know if you remember Mitch Trubisky, but remember they wouldn't put the TVs on in Hallis Hall because it was making him feel bad, and like that.
Will you just ask me if I remember Mitch Trubisky?
No. That specific moment where in Hallis Hall they had to the team facility. They wouldn't put the TVs on because everyone was saying mean things about Trubisky, and I
just wanted to make sure you didn't think I was like 14 or something.
I don't know, man. That slime game was a long time ago. But yeah, so if you're Ryan Poles, you're like, God, I mean, he's already been through it. And then if you get a guy like Caleb Williams to come in, he's got to go through it again. And so I don't know. I mean, there's a million different ways they can go with this, but they're spending like they're planning to not pay a quarterback anytime soon, if that makes sense. Right. You go get Montez Sweat, you give him the contract. You're like, okay, we're not worried about a quarterback contract anytime soon.
Yeah, they're about to reset the quarterback, their quarterback contract timeline. Let's move on to some other quarterbacks and teams that have gone through with their quarterbacks in recent years. 2 teams that we know pretty well, covering the New York sports space: the Giants and the Jets. And they had. Like this is what people don't get about like working up here and covering these teams. It doesn't matter how good they are. There's always going to be something to talk about. Like
it doesn't matter how good they are.
It doesn't matter how good they are because I have yet to be around like an actual good Jets team, and they're still always in the news for something. Same with the Giants, honestly. Like I remember covering Pat Shurmur's last game and seeing him get fired the next morning when we had like the postseason kind of sit down with the players and stuff. It's always a mess. But this weekend was actually a positive moment for the Giants and the Jets, and we got a nice redemption story for 2 quarterbacks who have kind of struggled so far this season, to put it nicely. And I want to ask you, put you on the spot. who had the funnier redemption game for New York? Zach Wilson against the Texans or Tommy D against the Packers last night?
Well, Zach Wilson's funny to me because, listen, I think when Zach is 28, 29, he's going to be a good quarterback, probably for the 49ers, or some other team, Packers, whatever. Zach Wilson has played 3 of these games almost identical to the way that he beat the Texans, okay? He beat the Titans his rookie year, the year that the Titans were the number 1 seed in the playoffs. I think he played the Chiefs similarly this year when they almost beat the Chiefs. And there was like that weird holding call on Sauce Gardner that gave Kansas City the game in that one. And then he plays this one. And Zach, it's like amnesia here in this market where Zach plays like he wants to play. And when he hit Garrett Wilson in the third quarter, and that game was scoreless at that point, no offense had done anything. And all of a sudden he evades Greenard, and then he gets out in open space and he does the foot pop throw to the middle of the field with 3 defenders there, and Garrett Wilson catches it. And then all of a sudden he becomes a quarterback who can play in a system. Like you have the throw to Tyler Conklin on the next drive where it's on schedule, which is something that Zach does not do at all well. And and then he hits Randall Cobb, and Randall Cobb was wide open for that touchdown. But I've seen him miss that throw in camp 100 times. And he's missed that throw in games before. But when he gets confident and he's allowed to play a little bit like he wants to play, then he starts playing like the quarterback they need him to. But all the Jets fans are like, why hasn't Hackett done this all along? Why hasn't Hackett let him throw the ball in the middle of the field into triple coverage and have Garrett Wilson catch it? I don't know. Probably because it was a bad idea. But Zach is a quarterback who needs to build his own confidence. You know what I mean? And when he does, he starts playing on schedule. And it's up to him a little bit. I mean, and so now we're at this weird point where it's like, oh, the Jets just haven't been doing enough for him. They haven't been helping him. Meanwhile, LaFleur's over in LA and, for half the season, Puka Nakua's got 300 catches. Like, this is not we're not surrounding him with bad people, bad coaches, maybe a bad offensive line.
For sure.
But Zach has never played on schedule well, and he needs to do certain things to motivate him to play on schedule. And then when he plays on schedule, he plays well. And then all of a sudden everyone freaks out and says, why aren't we having him play on schedule all the time? And so this is like the 8th time. He doesn't do it. And so, it's just like, it just feels like Groundhog Day. Like every time he has one of these good games, it's the same discourse coming out of it. And it's just like, Zach is going to need a hard sit down from a coach that can spend like a year with him and be like, dude, you can't do this all the time. Like you have to do all the little things well to get to the point where you can make the BYU pro day throw. Right. And it hasn't worked that way. And it's just so funny to me. So that to me is hilarious. Tommy DeVito is more wholesome. Like nobody expected that guy to do anything. And part of me does love that too, though, where the Giants always have this like very wholesome storyline going on, and the Jets are just this raging fire of anger and expectations, and the Giants are just it's just cute, bring your kids, it's a lovely thing. Tommy DeVito, so it's all funny.
The Zach Wilson thing to me is just laugh out loud hilarious because you have to pair it with the Diana Rossini report where she said wasn't sure if he wanted to come back and play, which I would understand if he wasn't in the position that he was in.
If he had played well before.
Right. If he had, see, like this is what's very fun to me about Zach stuff. It's the myth making that comes with it. Because he has the game that he had on Sunday where, second half, it's the best football that I've ever seen him play easily, like bar none. And now you can retroactively say, we'll see, he was benched without merit. No. That's a little bit too far. Like, it's not revisionist history to say that he definitely should have been benched. I would say the biggest problem is the options they left themselves when they had to bench him was Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. But his play at the time absolutely warranted trying something else. And when the report came out saying, was saying he was basically unclear if he wanted to play, might get hurt, blah, blah, blah. I can understand that, especially behind that offensive line. But brother, you're on the end of your rope here if you don't go back in these games and play, because you gotta show something, because I think it's pretty clear this is gonna be his last run with the Jets. Someone else is gonna, whether he's cut or traded, someone else will take him on next year. You got to start putting out some tape for your next stop, and like literally for the rest of your career if you're gonna try and piece this thing back together. So I thought it was good that he played. It was good to see him have that game. It's just so funny that it's just never quiet over there. There's always something going on. And this season has been an objective disaster. And it's just always coming back to some news, yap, 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 blah, blah, blah. It's amazing.
I feel so bad for Robert Saleh. Talking to some of my friends about it who are Jets fans, and they're just like, this guy's got to go. And I was like, this guy's a damn saint. To go up there week after week and to defend Zach and just be like, yeah, we're going to stick with him. And in the back of your head what you'd like to do, but nobody's helping you, Joe Flacco, nobody called Joe Flacco. Nobody traded for, whatever, the Josh Dobbs thing is over, but you basically tried to get Brett Rippon at the beginning of the season, and then they added him to the active roster when they moved on Stetson Bennett, and they were just like, whatever, what we have is fine, don't worry about it. And if you're Saleh, you're just like what is happening? And then you text Joe Benigno on WFAN to try to clear it up, and then Joe reads your text on the air.
That was one of the craziest things. This is probably a little niche for people
way too inside baseball,
right? Who haven't worked in the market. But dude, when it came across my timeline that Saleh was texting Joe Benigno, I was like,
so Joe is
what are you doing?
Yeah, for your listeners, Joe is that's the other thing too. And a lot of when you're talking about sports talk radio and a podcast, I know that everywhere has sports talk radio, but it's different in New York and Philly specifically. I would say probably Atlanta to some degree, Boston, Miami, where it gets violent and it gets crazy, and there are callers that just sort of become part of the landscape. And Joe had been doing that since the 70s, calling in at midnight and screaming. And then they just started paying him to do it. And he showed up and had a long career in radio. But he would just go on every Monday and just kill the Jets. And I guess Saleh was like, hey, dude, here's a point of clarity, thinking it would be off the record. And then all of a sudden he just reads it on the air, and totally misinterprets it, which is even funnier. But
yeah, Robert, if you listen to this, stop texting Joe, please, for your own sake. Stop texting. you just don't need to do that. All right, let's move on to the last funny thing before we get into some Chiefs talk. Another point of emphasis on the season that I would say just doesn't need to happen. The NFC South is just a total dumpster fire. Mm-hmm. Okay, because my favorite team, as people know, Falcons, they're in the NFC South. And the fact that this team still has a very realistic shot to host a playoff game next month is an affront to God, is what I would say. You have three teams all tied at 6 and 7 at the top of the NFC South with the Falcons, Bucks, and Saints. Just rolling around in the muck for the good majority of the season. Sometimes they have some nice moments. Sometimes they have some bad moments. I would still be inclined to say the Falcons are still the best team in the division, but who cares? They should have won that game on Sunday, and they blew it on the last drive of the game. And then they had a Hail Mary that they caught on the 2-yard line as time expired. Just very Falcons super duper young team stuff. The Bucks feel kind of just we're vibing in our first year without Brady. The Saints are stuck in disaster land probably for the next 2 or 3 years with the Derek Carr contract and all of the tens of millions of dollars that they have committed to this roster that they still have to push in the future years again because they couldn't just rip the Band-Aid off and let it explode after Drew Brees retired. It is a mess. The Bucks currently have the tiebreaker after beating the Falcons on Sunday. So as things stand right now, the Bucks would be hosting the Philadelphia Eagles in a wild card game to start the playoffs. I don't think anyone needs to see that.
No.
What are we doing here?
No. You know what, the Bucks, though? The Bucks are one of those teams where the Bucks are under most circumstances, a normal NFL season, like, well, I mean, even now, probably like the 18th best team in the NFL, right? And so, I don't know. I think that roster, as presently constructed, has enough players where if they were to, because this is how I'm looking at the NFC South now, right? If you have all your players on a heater at once, could you make a game somewhat interesting? And I would say that the Bucks have the most players on their team where it's like, okay, and I got a good defensive coordinator. Like, let's say I'm just playing a play caller who's, whatting his pants, and I can double A gap blitz the hell out of them and be vintage Todd Bowles and run them out of the room. And all of a sudden it's like, it's like 2020 again. The Bucks are the one team that I think, okay, maybe they could win a playoff game depending on who they face, right? Like the Cowboys or something like that, where I could see them like maybe surprising them, but nobody else in my mind. Like, I mean, if you put Derek Carr in a playoff game, I think it would be better for the franchise if he didn't. And like almost to the point where if I'm Dennis Allen, I'm thinking about like reading the room, and if we make the playoffs, just be like, hey, Taysom Hill, let's go, buddy. And everyone just freaks out and they get behind Taysom, and you play the math game and you try to just like zone read it down the field. And, that would be better than what their current option is. So I don't know. I think the Bucks are the closest team to a real football team, but God, the fact that we're having this discussion is sort of wild,
It's awful. And I honestly think my favorite part about this is for each three of these teams, I think you can make an easy argument that winning the division would actually be an overall negative for them. It's like, all right, let's use the Bucks, for example. All right, so we win the division. We get the Eagles or the Cowboys in the playoffs, first round. Maybe they could give the Eagles a game because they did earlier this year. I feel pretty confident that they would get absolutely steamrolled by Dallas. I don't think they would stand a chance there. Now you end up with the 19th pick because you made the playoffs. So you as the worst team in the playoffs, you get the 19th pick, and you play a first place schedule next year. None of these teams are ready for that challenge, for any of that. And if you the Falcons, you might need to go get a quarterback. This team isn't ready to go play a first place schedule, and the 19th pick doesn't do a whole lot for them as far as their services go. It would be one thing if you had a chance to like make a run and win these games, but I would expect like if Dallas rolled up to Atlanta for a wild card game, I would expect that to be like a 10-point spread on the road.
Oh, at least. Yeah.
At least.
I mean, the Dolphins and the Titans was 14 last night.
Yes.
So, I mean, it could be closer to that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. This is one of the few times where I can say, I don't really know if I want the Falcons to win the division. I don't really think I see the merit in getting blown out on national television again and then not having the resource that you would like to have in the offseason. So
I do think they could be one quarterback away, though. Like,
I do think they're close. I really do think they're close.
I mean, Ryan Nielsen is lights out. He is a really, probably one of the best hires that they've made, staff hires that they've made in a really long time. And going back to the post Kyle Shanahan Falcons series of staff hiring, that Ryan Nielsen is probably your best post Kyle Shanahan hire, I would say. This
is the best defense they've had since Michael Vick was the quarterback.
Wow.
Yeah. They never had a defense for Matt.
That's true. I mean, if you look at like Mike Smith, none of those guys
Dan Quinn
really had anything like that. And, he's good. And my thought on the situation is I think Art is the right guy for the job. I really do. I think you're in a precarious spot where I think if he were willing to abandon the sort of niceties that come with this, because a lot of coaching agents won't let coaches go into their final year without an extension, right? And so, but if you're Art, just be like, hey, I'll bet on myself, just get me a quarterback in the offseason and everything will be okay. I really think this team could like win the division next year pretty handily, if they had a guy that was a little bit more capable. I mean, Drake London, there was that moment on Sunday where I think everyone just got a little tired of not moving the football. And when Ritter threw that ball to him, it was like down the right sideline on our TV.
Yes.
And he just like, he looks like a guy falling out of a helicopter, and he just still grabs the ball out of midair and is like, you know what? I'm just going to do this on my own now. And, you know, I'm just going to figure this out. Like, and he's like 22. Like, you know, this team's going to be good. It's just,
yes.
It's going to take some time.
That's the thing that I don't think people are giving enough credit to. Like when they get pissed at Arthur sometimes, like, dude, this team is being run, like the offense is being run by children, bro. Like Desmond Ritter is what, 24, Bijan's 20, 21, Kyle Pitts and Drake London are both 22, Algier's 23. Like, yeah, like they're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Like, and then people get mad at Arthur, which I understand because he's kind of a prick. Like, especially to, you know, with the fantasy football stuff this year. You know, you're not producing a lot. Come on,
yeah,
let's be real. I do think he's fine. I think he's a good enough person for the job. And now that, like, if we can zoom out from just the Falcons and the Bucks and the Saints before we move on to, you know, the meat of the show with the Chiefs. Holy crap. Like, the Panthers can't even compete in this division. They lost 28-6 on Sunday in a game where Derek Carr had 37 yards going into the fourth quarter. Like, I don't understand how, because usually when we look at the NFL, like, you kind of feel like any team could win any week. There's a lot of parity. There's a lot of upsets. And in the division with 3, 6, and 7 teams, the Panthers are like 2 off seasons away from competing with them. That's crazy.
And it's all on Tepper, right? Like, let's go back to when Matt Rule got the job, and I forget who it was. It was like an interior offensive lineman, and they traded to like upgrade at guard, like as soon as Matt Rule got there. And I was like, wait a minute, what are they doing? This is a roster. This needs to be reset now. This is a bad team. And then they upgraded, and then they panicked. And then they traded Christian McCaffrey and got rid of DJ Moore. And then it was like, okay, thank God they're kind of rebuilding. But then they're like, no, we're going to get the number 1 pick and be good at the same time. And to do that, we're going to get Adam Thielen, because that's what Bryce Young needs is just Adam Thielen and almost nobody else. And I know they took a lot of, you know, second round pick swings at the receiver position to try to hit on something. But what Tepper is doing, I likened it to, I said this to someone the other day, it would be like if his Instagram Reels feed were just like 25-second snippets of smart football people, and he just scrolled through it and was like, took 10 seconds of everything and was like, got it. Let's apply all of this craziness at once. Like, and he's trying all these things that successful organizations do, but all at the same time, and they're all counterintuitive to one another, you know? And you know, someone was saying the other day that, you know, he was obsessed with the idea of, you know, the 49ers got so many comp picks for their assistant coaches. And it's like, yeah, because the 49ers are a really good team and they hired good assistant coaches.
Right,
like, you know,
right.
and there's just like a difference between
well,
like,
just hire black people then.
Yeah, it's just like, no, like stop, you know. And I do think Thomas Brown's going to be good. I think he's in a terrible spot. I think he got thrown into the tire fire this year. And what was it, week 5? They were just like, all right, you know, see if you can figure this out, because Frank Reich can't. And, you know, Frank Reich won a Super Bowl. And so it's just like, it's a mess. And I do think that when the obit is written on that team, I think that there will be even more of a mess. It will be even more of a mess than we know. I think Bryce Young will be good, but Tepper needs to get out of the way, and that entire thing needs to be like leveled like a bulldozer, you know?
Yeah. I'm a little worried about Bryce.
Are you?
I am. I know the situation's been horrible, like horrendous. But you know, your first pick in the draft, you got to show a little something, even in spite of bad circumstances. Like, I think CJ Stroud would probably have a pretty tough season in Carolina if he was the first pick, but I don't know. I'm a little worried about the floor with Bryce and what it could mean for them if they don't kind of really spend money and draft picks to kind of improve that offense in a big way. Because honestly, like, the defense is so far away, I'll say, screw it, whatever. We need to get this offense moving like today.
Defense has actually played well in spots, you know. And what's funny is Evero, I thought, was a slam dunk head coaching candidate before the year. And I thought he did really well in Denver last year, given the circumstances too. And I do think he's called some really good games despite the lack of talent in Carolina. But that place is so messed up that they're not going to make him the interim head coach because he made Steve Wilkes the interim head coach, and Steve Wilkes coached his ass off, and everyone's telling him, oh, you should have kept this guy, and now he doesn't want to be in that position, right? He wants to clean house, but I think it'll be interesting to see who he can get, because I honestly think his best case scenario is hoping that Belichick would want to come there, which is crazy.
Good luck to the Panthers. Pretty far away from competing in the division with 3, 6, and 7 teams. They're not even close. All right. So we talked about just Bryce Young and if he's got a chance and, what his development chances are in Carolina. And we move now to a team that is on a totally different spectrum, but having, similar types of problems. And we have the Kansas City Chiefs who, in this blessed run that they've had with Patrick Mahomes, they find themselves in the unfortunate circumstance of being 8-5, third in the AFC conference, but it just feels worse than it usually does, right? By all the metrics, Patrick Mahomes is still having a pretty good season, compared to other quarterbacks this season. I know offense is down, but even in that, framework, he's still having a pretty successful season. The Chiefs offense as a whole has some pretty good metric numbers, but they're not scoring like they used to, or scoring like they were even just last year when, they traded Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, and Patrick Mahomes still lit the NFL on fire with the same group of receivers, except, they kind of subbed out Juju Smith-Schuster for Rashee Rice this year. It's kind of the only change, but it's a whole lot worse than it was last year. We just had a game on Sunday against the Bills where Kadarius Toney lined up offsides that cost Travis Kelce one of the coolest plays I've ever seen. And it caused Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to both kind of melt down after the game. Well, not kind of in Patrick Mahomes' sense. He absolutely melted down after the game.
Yeah.
Trying to go after a ref, not complaining to Josh Allen after the game was over.
That's my favorite part.
Going in. Okay, my favorite part was going into the press conference. This is when to me, Pat had one of those days where you drink too much, and the next day you have to make some apologies to some people. I was wilding yesterday. Sorry. And I knew he was at that point when he said that this was going to affect Travis Kelce because that play was going to be in the Hall of Fame. They still need to put it in canon or something like that. You've lost the plot. This is full on rage speak, bro. Full on rage speak. But I get it because this has not been a fun season for him. You wrote a great article this week on the Chiefs wide receiver problem is now a full blown crisis, but I don't think you could even argue against at this point. How did the Chiefs even move on from here to try and salvage what's left of their season?
It's interesting to me that you're not doing anything. You didn't do anything. And if you would have pitched me if you would have given me the Chiefs' elevator pitch at the beginning of the season, I would have bought in. I would have said, okay, that makes sense, right? At some point, Patrick Mahomes is going to have to break all of these guys in and create relationships with them individually, just like he's created with Travis Kelce, who may wind up being the greatest tight end in NFL history, right? So it's a little bit of a flawed logic there. But Sky Moore looked good at the end of last year. All of a sudden, and he knew Rashee Rice before they even drafted him. He'd been working out with him and all that kind of stuff. So you have these ingrained relationships, and I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But to not act, I think, when you had the chance to act, at the trade deadline, and at least try to do something, or even like the Eagles signed Julio Jones, and I'm not saying bring in Julio Jones because you need Julio Jones, but bring in Julio Jones just to practice around these guys, everyone's like, well, that's the wide receiver coach's problem. It's not really. Every offensive position coach, their job is to be the assistant offensive coordinator. All these guys all week are working on the game plan. Nobody's sitting with these kids and being like, hey, Kadarius Toney, you got to check that you're on the line of scrimmage, or hey, here's a unique way to get open. Here's a move that you can make at the line. Here's a drill that you can do. And so even do something like that, and everyone was saying, well, what can they do? What can they do? Do that. bring in somebody that they can watch practice, or someone that's just going to help them from a skills perspective, because at this point, I think the pressure has mounted to the point where they've lost confidence in themselves, like Valdez-Scantling in the Eagles game. Like that's a confidence drop, Watson, that next play on the 4th and 15, like you could have had that, went through your hands, because everyone thinks the Chiefs receivers suck. I think you've internalized that as a unit, and now you're just making extremely costly mistakes. I mean, I would argue you would be 3 wins better if you had who was available this offseason. I mean, if you kept Juju Smith-Schuster and signed DeAndre Hopkins, I think you'd have at least 2 more wins than you have right now, maybe 3. It's just crazy.
It's crazy because this is the same guys as last year. The same guys, and they've gotten so much worse. In terms of like overall execution, it's kind of baffling. Do you think that Pat had any validation in his complaints about the officiating?
No. I mean, I this is like my favorite. This is one of my favorite arguments. And I remember sending this off on Twitter and then closing my laptop because I was like, I'm not getting into it. Chiefs fans are top 5 in terms of delusion, in terms of just out in space with how they feel and what they think. He was so off sides that, and they're like, well, the official's got to help him. Okay. He didn't check with the official. Like Andy Reid confirmed it. He didn't ask the official. And then third, he was so off sides that the backside judge couldn't see the football. So Kadarius Toney was literally blocking the football. So yes, under normal circumstances, and I liked whoever leaked the Zapruder film to ESPN of like all the other offensive neutral zone infractions that they didn't call in that game was just next level insane, has been totally red pilled as a human. But like, you were so offsides that it would be irresponsible not to call that. And that's the problem. Like, full stop. I don't they've called it 12 times this year. They called it twice on the Packers. If you believe the officiating crew, I mean, they send the teaching tapes every week and they were like, hey guys, this is a point of emphasis. It's getting out of control. People are lining up above the ball. We're going to start calling it. Okay, then sorry. Like you can't, we've done all that we can do. And like, the ref thing, they brought up Terry McLaurin, which I think was, what was that, 2 years ago, where Terry McLaurin checked with the side judge and the side judge was like, yeah, you're good. And then he threw the flag on him anyway. This isn't that. This is like, I was almost thinking like, if I was the ref, he didn't ask, so you don't have to signal to him. And refs, you're doing a lot of other stuff. You're counting to make sure they have 11 guys. You have stuff going on. And then, but if I was the ref, I'm probably looking at him and I'm being like, oh my God, he's going to back up at some point, right? Like you're just so jarred that he's that far over the ball that you don't even think to do anything as an official, because you're like, at some point that guy's got to he's got to do something, right? And he just doesn't. But I don't know. So that's my take on it. But I sound exasperated just because I did go back and read my mentions and like, my God, like,
it's bleak in there.
You made a mistake. Like, just own up to it.
A lot of rage. Yeah.
Golly.
Dude, take one step back, bro. I understand that part of the reason why part of the reason why you can get away with this sometimes because like the refs just won't call it. But you don't get to not follow the rules. Right. I don't know. Yeah. It is what it is. And I think, as you start moving forward, obviously, it's a great thing that the Chiefs can have a year of turmoil and strife, and like they still could get the number 1 seed depending on how things shake out. Like this is a really like spot of royalty that they're complaining from. You're still 8-5 and are going to host a playoff game if things continue to move in this direction. But for next season, it's clear they need to get a wide receiver. They need to get someone else in there because you can't just run this back again after this season. And you have a nice player in Rashee Rice. You still have Travis Kelce for who knows how much longer. He's having another monster season. I have this idea, and it's obviously, spurred by my own team, the Falcons. Back in 2011, when they had Tony Gonzalez, they had Roddy White, but they still felt like they needed something else. What did they do? They traded all of those picks up to 6 to go get Julio Jones. So if you're looking at your cap space, and I don't really know exactly how it would break down for them and what they'll be able to spend. If Chris Jones is still on the roster, if he's not, that's probably gonna have a big say in it. But if they're tight on cash, why not go make the big swing? Go get like if Marvin Harrison falls to like 4, it would take a lot to go get him, but it might be the jump start they need to get back to being like the scariest offense in the league next season.
So everybody's arguing now that, what the Chiefs are doing is, this was the long-term planning year that always needed to happen. When you start giving this guy money, you have to act like the Patriots and you have to find guys off the scrap heap and you have to do this. But that very attitude caused the end of the Patriot dynasty. Like Brady was just like, I'm so sick of doing this and you guys got me Randy Moss one time. And then the rest of the time I've had to make it work with a tight end. And then whatever else you guys grab off the bottom basement in free agency. And so I think that you have to take precedent into account. And the other thing too is we don't know how long Patrick Mahomes is going to play. We don't know how long he's going to be great. We have to remind ourselves of that over and over and over again. Andrew Luck just walked away from football. Half of these guys, by the time they hit 30, are like, I'm done. Patrick Mahomes' mobility may decline when he's in his earlier 30s. Like he may be like Russell Wilson, where it takes a season for him to adjust because his body just doesn't move the way that it used to. And he has to figure out a little bit different way to play. So I think you have to act like the 49ers or the Eagles. And every time you get a whiff at a Super Bowl, you have to strangle it and you have to do whatever you can to make it happen. And I don't think the Chiefs were thinking that way. And I also don't think that, I would guess, if I had to guess, I don't think they're allowed to spend like some other teams. Like I would guess that they probably have some restrictions, or I would guess that they're encouraged to spend less, or that there's probably something where it's like, okay, we can save a little bit of money and put a little bit more onus on Patrick. Like I do think that there's, that's just my observation. I do think that that's kind of an attitude that they have at that in that place.
Go get Marvin. Go get Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors. Make a swing, man. I think it would be good for them, and it would be good for the league.
Or you go get Mike Evans and you give him the Ohtani contract. Like we pay you $1 this year, and then every year after you retire, we'll just cut you. We'll deliver a brick of cash for like $10 million.
Yeah. Last thing before we move on to some voicemails, just to show how spoiled the Chiefs have gotten and how really spoiled we have gotten with our expectations of Pat Mahomes. If you go to Next Gen Stats and cut off the marker for all players with 150 dropbacks this season, Patrick Mahomes still ranks 5th in expected points added per dropback. As horrible as the season has felt for them, he is still putting up pretty strong numbers. I think they're just turning the ball over way more than they used to and having some absolutely self-destructive mistakes. But it is time to get to some voicemails. I haven't done this in a few weeks, but we got a bunch after the Monday night doubleheader last night. And based on the ones we've gotten in the past, these are usually pretty funny. So, Stone, could you please play the first voicemail?
What's up, Exempt List? This is Sam in Chicago. I just got done watching Monday Night Football, and my question is, which would be a more disastrous contract extension for a team to give out? The Lions giving Goff like $45 million for 3 or 4 years, or the Dolphins giving Tua the Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert contract?
Wow. That's tough. What would you say?
Oh, I don't think it's even close. I think it's giving Tua the Joe Burrow contract because, Jared Goff would get a slightly upgraded Daniel Jones contract. Like that's what he's going to get. It's like Daniel Jones is like a little polish on it, right? But Daniel Jones contract, you can get out of it after next year. Jared Goff, you can get out of it and you can still draft and develop behind him. If Tua, if you're going to give Tua $50 million, that can't happen. Watch the game last night when Tyreek Hill goes out. Sorry, Tua, but it can't happen.
See, this is why I gave the Lions an F for their draft grade. And I was probably a little bit too strong. But my point was, you had the 6th and 18th pick walking into that draft. That means you can trade up to 3 without even giving up a future first. right? And then you could still have your 35th pick because you had 6. All you have to do is just jump up 3 spots. You might be able to do that with the 18th pick and a little pocket change. But instead, they traded down and they doubled down on Goff. And it's like, dude, we already know what this looks like. We know what it looks like when it gets cold and it gets tough. It looks like what happened against the Bears. So I just thought it was a little frustrating that they didn't pounce on that opportunity when they had it. But yeah, you're right. Because once Tyreek went out of that game last night against the Titans, they had nothing until he came back in. Like they couldn't move the ball. So now you kind of got to start thinking about, okay, well, how much of it is Tua? How much is it Tyreek? And if we think it's way more Tyreek than Tua, then you can't give him the $250 million. Stone, next one, please.
Hey, longtime listener, first-time caller. Just wanted to know, what needs to change for the Falcons? I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, which means I enjoy self-deprecation and other things of that nature. So watching the game this weekend has been typical but annoying. So I just need to know what needs to change.
You get a quarterback, and I think things will change pretty fast. And it's frustrating because honestly, I don't hate Ritter. I think Ritter could actually end up being a quality quarterback. It just depends how long do you want to wait for that to happen. You know, they're on a different timeline than most rebuilding teams, right? Because they're in year 3 of this Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot thing, but they couldn't spend anything but bargain bin money until this offseason because of all the dead cap from the end of Dimitroff and Dan Quinn years. I thought they did a really nice job in free agency in a way that's showing up on the field for them in tangible ways when guys are healthy. So yeah, I still think they're moving in the right direction, even if the wins and losses are frustrating. It's a really young offense, like I said before, but better quarterback play would solve so much, and just not turning the ball over, like 3 or 4 times a game. I think that's it.
Who I would like this, it wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be able to take on the contract, but like a quarterback who you could get next year, with certain circumstances, like even like Daniel Jones, right? Where he would add something to the running game. He would complete passes and he would just open the field up like you could design an offense for him almost like the Giants did with Saquon and Daniel Jones. Of course, Daniel Jones isn't going to hold up to the running as much, like his body isn't going to be able to take it, but even someone like that, like I don't think you need to go so much higher than Ritter. Like I think you need to just have like Ritter plus, like Ritter premium, and that's just, you need a body type, you need to change the math in the run game, and Justin you need Fields. Someone well, yeah. I mean, if you could do that, that would be even better.
Yeah. All right. We got one more voicemail to get to.
Hey, Charles. I was watching McDaniel, Shanahan. All those guys are absurd. It's kind of like cheating just because they're so good. Do you think we can just get rid of this cheat forward motion play that Tyreek and all these guys run? It really makes it hard for all the teams with real quarterbacks play defense, and it's just not fair. Can we fix that, please? It's getting very annoying. All right. Thanks.
Yes, please. Yes. For the love of God. Yes. I am an admitted defensive enthusiast. I think defensive players are a persecuted class of players in the NFL. The rules are so slanted against them. This is one thing we can fix. Like if we're going to have illegal shifts, illegal motions where guys aren't supposed to be moving forward at the snap of the ball, like that's CFL. All right. Keep that over there, get set, and then start the play. It's just like when you factor in the can't touch a quarterback, pass interference can be, anywhere from like a 10 to a 60-yard penalty. You got to give something back to the defense. And when you have Tyreek Hill and other teams using these motions where they're running forward at the snap, it's so hard to stop them because you don't have a chance really to kind of figure out what's going on before everything starts. And all of a sudden you have someone who could be like an Olympic track athlete running through your secondary wide open because the math has changed for you so quickly in a way where you weren't able to react to it. So yes, I don't think we need to get rid of pre-snap motion as a whole, but the specific one where you can still move as the ball's being snapped, they got to tighten up on that one.
I'll be the devil's advocate here and say that I part of me always wonders, and because you watch Tyreek Hill at the end of last year, right? And the Dolphins offense kind of peter out at the end of last year. And, you look at like Olympic sprinters, people who have to run at that volume and at that speed. They're not putting in the kind of stress on their bodies that Tyreek Hill is on a down-to-down basis. Like Tyreek Hill is in a full sprint into the backfield, then sort of a modified stop and turn, and then another full sprint. You are wearing down your lower body at an extreme rate. And I wonder that if you need him so much that like I think almost preventing that from happening would be a good thing for Tyreek, because like our body only has so many sprints in it. Like it does, and especially, I mean, Odell Beckham, I remember, hearing him kind of talk about that. And I think his mom was a sprinter. She was like a well-known sprinter. And, the way he would take care of his body and stuff is kind of to prevent some of that stuff from happening. And he couldn't. But, I'm always fascinated with that kind of stuff. The Dolphins in particular, load management on their sprinters. They're doing so much work in the backfield before they even get into the meat of the play that I wonder if preventing that from happening would actually elongate some of their careers a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting thing to talk about, but I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything.
I am.
I don't know. I think that's a good point to end it on. Let's get out of here. Connor, before we let you out, you got anything you want to share people that you're working on to keep an eye out?
Subscribe to the magazine, folks. It's still great. We just did Sports Person of the Year. I have a story about Kelsey actually in there that's pretty fun. The December issue, which came out at the end of November, we had like a behind the scenes look at how all sideline personnel operate. So we got to interview like the people who drive the injury cart and the equipment manager, and learned a lot of like crazy things about what's going on during an NFL game that have nothing to do with the game. So subscribe to a magazine, people. Put down your phone and read something. Read a hard copy product. You'll be better off for it.
Yeah, support good journalists. It's hard out here. So
that's right. Come on.
When you get to support something good, I think that's something we should all take an opportunity to do. That's going to do it for this episode of the Exempt List. Please send us more voicemails. You can do that at speakpipe.com/0blitz. Ask a question, make fun of yourself, make fun of me, cry, whatever you want. We'll listen, reply on the show. We'll be back with another episode of the Exempt List next week. Tune in tomorrow for an episode of Inside Coverage with Jason Fitz, Charles Robinson, and Jory Epstein. I'm Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at @4verts. Conor is on Twitter at Conor Orr. That's O with 2 R's, not OAR. And our producer, Stone Rochelle, is on Twitter at SJ Rochelle. We will see you guys next week.